Okay, Smackdown Lowdown, episode 1. Let's get into it. Becky Lynch, right? She's got something going on that I don't know. It's different than what anybody else has been able to capture, and I think everybody else is. I think I notice other people trying to capture the same thing, and it's funny because she mentioned that everybody else is trying to capture the same kind of buzz that she has. And there's something really like, okay, for instance, we saw AJ Styles. He's recently, and he hit Vince McMahon. Um, him and Daniel Bryan just had this very Attitude Era esque brawl out in the concourse. And he kind of came out right in the middle of when Becky and Asuka were still in the ring. So he's getting rude, right? He's getting rude. He's getting brash. I feel like they're trying to kind of like maybe kind of make their own like Stone Cold kind of vibe for him. You hate to like anytime anybody kind of goes bad, but people love it. You hate to compare him to Stone Cold. But I think that's what everybody does. I think it's the obvious thing to do. But I think that very much it's hard to remember exactly because I was so young. I was probably 10 years old. Um, to remember exactly how Stone Cold like broke. I remember Steve Austin before he was Stone Cold, and then I just remember all the Austin 316 shirts. So it's almost like there's this area in the middle that I can't completely recall. So it's difficult for me to say exactly for sure that I think that Stone Cold or that Austin became Stone Cold or that Stone Cold became 316 or whatever. Uh, Organically, you can read about it and they say that he grabbed the mic one time and said that, Austin 316 means I just whooped your ass or whatever. And that was the start of something, right? So, uh, so it seems like it was probably pretty organic. They didn't plan for him to be both a kind of a bad guy, yet kind of loved. Yeah, and maybe it was part of like a product of the times a little bit for somebody. It was very in vogue for somebody to be a hero by telling their boss to kiss their ass, right? Uh, that's I still love that, and I don't have a problem with my boss, but there's just a part of me that still loves that, right? So, but it seems like it was pretty organic, and they didn't really plan that it was going to blow up the way that it did, which is what reminds me, like, why Becky Lynch right now reminds me so much of what I think is the case with Stone Cold too. Anyway, I don't I don't think it seemed like I think it seemed to me when Becky went bad and attacked Charlotte that we were supposed to be mad about that or boo her, or a certain percentage of people that were Becky Lynch fans even might kind of break away from her a little bit, or at least, draw a little bit of like some heel heat or something. Uh, her and Charlotte were such good friends, and I think that when they went to shake hands and Becky just you know squandered that opportunity to be a gracious champion, there was a part of me that was legitimately kind of upset, and not in like a serious way, but in like it'd just be so much cooler if they were friends still, you know? Like I would like that. That's what I thought at the time. Then she starts coming out in the leather jacket, and she's the man. I'm Becky Lynch. I'm Becky Balboa. I'm the man. She is the man. She is absolutely the man. It is absolutely over. People love it. Becky Lynch, I didn't even think she was gonna fight on SmackDown this Tuesday. I thought she was just coming out. And I even like wrote down, because I knew I was gonna be doing this. I even wrote down, Becky doesn't even have to wrestle to get the biggest pop, what could be the biggest pop of the night from the crowd, from the audience, right? She doesn't even have to wrestle to get the biggest reaction. I don't think there's that many people who can say that in the modern era of the WWE. I don't know how fondly or quite how all of you necessarily remember the Attitude Era. Excuse me. I tend to think that I view it through slightly rose-colored glasses, right? Like I was a child, but if you go back on the WWE Network and you watch some of those old Raws and SmackDowns and stuff like that, the biggest names, they didn't wrestle that often. They were often there, and most of the storyline of the show, it'd be like you tune into Raw and you'd see a bunch of storyline stuff involving, like, you know, the Stone Cold and Vince McMahon and The Rock, and, you know, maybe some you know, DX causing shenanigans or whatever. And then you'd see some wrestling that was not necessarily directly tied to any of the storyline that you've been watching. That's, you know, that's pretty true. And you know, there's some ways in which that is good, because it keeps your big names on TV, and it keeps people buying the pay-per-views, right? Because they see all this like heat and lead up and drama between two big names, but they're not going to fight until a pay-per-view. You're going to have to pay money if you want to see that fight. So it keeps people buying the pay-per-views, but it also keeps your main talent on TV and selling merchandise, and at the same time gives some of those the middle ground and lower sort of names an opportunity, if you will, to be on TV and to maybe become one of the people who do most of their work on the pay fights, right? So that's not altogether a bad thing. I'm not trying to say it's altogether a bad thing, but arguably Raw might be the average Raw right now for the in-ring product, I think is, and the average SmackDown too, same goes, is more entertaining than it was, you know, 20 years ago. The in-ring stuff, even if it isn't as violent, even if it isn't as bloody, and even if the chair shots don't come to the head anymore, I mean, that's probably good for the longevity of these guys. I mean, we complain about it as fans, but this is going to turn into a football. It already has in some ways. Let's not even talk about some of the wrestlers that have just done some out of character things. So, like, you know, I don't think, you know, despite the fact that it was all more violent and everything like that, I still think the in-ring stuff is truly is better now, right? So, like, I'm not trying to like pine for those days or anything, you know, but it does seem like the WWE is searching for that, right? And Becky Lynch, I think, got when she went heel. They expected her to get booed, and she didn't. And it was like, really, it was like this. Or like I said, I started off, I was upset about it at least a little bit, like as a fan, and then I was, man, I love this new Becky Lynch, you know. Uh, and AJ Styles, I think I said in my last video, I'm not a big AJ Styles fan. I find him to be a little bit vanilla and kind of boring. But the concourse battle with Daniel Bryan, that was great. It could have been better, but that was fun. I did not expect it to happen. Daniel Bryan came out of nowhere, surprised me. You know, I like where this is headed. SmackDown has had a run of a few really good shows in a row, and I think that they're making decisions over there with their best talent that maybe I think Raw is kind of catching up to now a little bit. They're figuring out that they kind of got to promote the guys that people are cheering for, right? You know. Speaking of things SmackDown is doing right and seems to always be doing right, their women's division. You got to cross your fingers that like Lacey Evans and Nikki Cross and the other female NXT call-ups that they go to Raw. SmackDown's women's division it's fine. It's beyond fine. It's really good. One thing I think that you could see potentially in the future with women's wrestling that might actually really be a benefit to the whole company is you remember like in WCW a while back, like they had the TV title, and the guy who had the TV title was sort of like a quick, cheap route, kind of, to being able to contend for the big belt. You didn't have to take the route through the contenders necessarily. You had the TV title, you were entitled to a title shot for the heavyweight championship or whatever they called it, the world championship, whatever it was back then. And I think something like that for the women's division in the WWE that can bounce back and forth between the two shows. So I don't want like a women's TV title on each show. I don't think that would be too many belts, especially on Raw. This is really to serve the overwhelming amount of female talent on SmackDown and give them something else to wrestle for. I think it's basically the same thing they're going to do with sounds like the tag team title is going to work in very much the same way. That's what I think they should do with something like a TV title. Have it bounce back and forth between shows. It's a good opportunity to get a match on a show. It could be a person from Raw versus a person from SmackDown and take place on either Raw or SmackDown. That could be really interesting. Sometimes I think the next NXT call-up, though, should really just be the writers. Whoever writes for NXT should be the next call-up to the main roster. They need some help there. I heard about a while back Vince hired a bunch of TV writers who didn't quite pan out on soap operas and drama shows and stuff like that. And I think it kind of shows sometimes. I really do. I think sometimes the writing can be really bad, but it seems like NXT's got a different, and it would make sense that they would have a different group of writers than the people doing the stuff for the main roster. Imagine each show probably has its own writers, but still, it can be kind of bad. And they could use a little something like that, something like a TV title to bounce back and forth between the two shows for the women's division would really, I think, help give the ladies on SmackDown something else to fight for, and maybe even help us find a little bit more talent over on the Raw side, because outside of like Ronda Rousey and Ember Moon and Sasha Banks. And I'm sure that I am going to forget somebody because I'm listing them off right now. But I get a little bored of the singles talent over on Raw, whereas on SmackDown, I just feel like it's overflowing with talent in the women's division. It really is. Uh, I haven't even. We're 15 minutes in. This is crazy. I'm gonna end up going for 20 minutes again. I apologize, but I'm so glad Rey Mysterio's back. That fight with Andrade, that was the fight of the night, right? I mean, how was it not? That was the fight of the night. That was the fight of maybe the week for WWE. We'll see. We got NXT coming up tomorrow, and they have a tendency to steal the show. 205 Live, I have not watched yet, and they have a tendency to steal the show. So I guess it's a little early to call it the fight of the week, but as of the moment that it happened, it was the fight of the week. That Hurricane Rana type thing off the top rope that Mysterio did on Almas and took him off the apron onto the floor. Holy Moses! You're kidding me. Man, I'm glad Rey Mysterio's back. And I'm trying to, like, that dude and honestly, and Mustafa Ali too, who didn't have a good showing tonight, but has, since he's been on SmackDown, has done some impressive things. He was always cool to watch on 205 Live. I'm really glad they moved him up to SmackDown. I was kind of surprised by it. And I was really surprised by it. It just doesn't seem like a McMahon move to take a guy who weighs 170 pounds and throw him into the mix on a real show like that. It just doesn't seem like a McMahon move. And not as like somebody's sidekick, but as like a wrestler. I heard that Daniel Bryan, I did hear that Daniel Bryan kind of lobbied for it really hard. And good for him, because that dude can wrestle. That dude can flat out wrestle. And he really displays emotions really well on his face, and in a way that I think is not the cheesiest I've seen. Like, I don't know. You see these sometimes, people surprised, and they're all like, and it gets a little outrageous. He's got this like more. I mean, I guess he's pretty animated too, but it seems a bit more natural. I really buy it. I buy it when he's like acting like he's hurt. I buy it tonight when Samoa Joe's beating up on him. I bought it. Right. Speaking of Samoa Joe, he has gone full on villain in the last handful of months. Right. I enjoy that. That's kind of what I was hoping they were going to do with Dean Ambrose on Raw when he came out with the gas mask that one night and said, I think maybe they were in Pittsburgh and said that Pittsburgh stinks. I thought they were going to do kind of like a Bane thing with him for a little bit, and go for it. Make him like a full-on, that's kind of what they're doing with Samoa Joe. They've made him a full-on bad guy. Randy Orton, too, in a lot of ways. Just made him a full-on bad guy that will just attack a random, wrestler for no good reason. Maybe, and I like how Randy Orton and Samoa Joe tend to go after, and it makes sense. You wouldn't just send him after somebody nobody cared about. You send him after a fan favorite. That's the right thing to do. It makes for good TV. I'd like to see more of that. But I would. One thing that it didn't happen tonight. It happened a couple months back during the AJ Styles feud. Samoa Joe came out wearing a black T-shirt and some jeans. Do you remember this? He looked like somebody you would see at an Applebee's. He did not look like a professional wrestler like that. And I love Applebee's. I'm not trying to bag on people go to Applebee's. Like, whatever. That's, get your pretzel sticks, right? But this dude does not look like a professional wrestler in street clothes at all. And yeah, hopefully they never do that again. ever. Anyway, I don't think I've forgotten anything. Those are kind of my thoughts on SmackDown. Tune in a couple of days. I'm going to be talking to my buddy Scott. We're going to do like a Skype thing. He lives in Florida, so we're going to split screen it up. I'm sure he's got all kinds of outlandish things to say. He threatened that he wrote some big monologue in support of the about how great the Singh brothers are. So the dude's crazy. That's why he's coming on the show. Anyway, thanks for watching.